I made a batch of food in my kitchen last October that will still be safe to eat in the year 2049. No freezer, no canning, no chemical preservatives, no refrigeration at any point in the process. The total ingredient cost was $14.30. It has been sitting on my shelf in a cloth pouch since then, and the only thing that has changed is that it smells slightly better as the fat continues to cure. This is pemmican, and this is the original recipe. The block I made last October is dark brown and dense, about the size of a thick paperback book, and it weighs just over 2 pounds. When I hold it, I can feel the firmness of the rendered fat that has set completely solid around the protein fibers. There is no moisture to press out of it, no give. It smells faintly of meat and berries and something earthy underneath that I can only describe as very old and very preserved. When I cut a thin slice and eat it, the fat melts almost immediately on the tongue, releasing a concentrated savory richness that is followed by the slight sweetness of the dried berries worked into the mixture. It is not a snack. It is a meal compressed into something the size of a cracker. That block represents approximately 3,500 calories, enough to sustain one adult through 2 full days of hard physical labor. The Cree and Lakota peoples who developed the original formula were not making trail food for convenience. They were engineering a survival technology as precise and intentional as anything produced in a modern food science laboratory. I did not invent any of this. Nobody alive did. The word pemmican derives from the Cree word Pemmican, itself from pimi, meaning fat or grease, documented by European fur traders in journals dating to the 1600s. The Hudson's Bay Company formalized its procurement of pemmican from Plains Cree producers beginning in 1779 and maintained standardized contracts specifying weight, fat ratio, and permitted berry types for trade-grade pemmican through the 1850s. The company's internal records from that period document pemmican batches remaining edible after 17 years of storage in standard wooden presses. The British Admiralty provisioned Arctic expeditions with pemmican beginning with the Franklin expedition of 1845. And the Royal Navy Victualling Board issued preparation specifications in 1848 that survive in the Public Records Office in London. The British military attempt to restrict Métis pemmican production in 1814, which nearly sparked open conflict along the Red River, was specifically because pemmican was the logistical backbone of the entire northern fur trade. It worked too well and cost too little for the supply system to be ignored. So let me show you the exact ratios and the exact process I used, sourced from Hudson's Bay Company procurement records and Métis production documentation from the early 1800s. The science of why pemmican lasts 25 years is not complicated once you understand it. Food spoils through 2 primary mechanisms: microbial activity, meaning bacteria, mold, and yeast consuming the food, and oxidative rancidity, meaning fat molecules reacting with oxygen and breaking down. Pemmican defeats both simultaneously. Rendering fat to a high temperature kills every microorganism present. Drying the meat to below 10% moisture content removes the water activity that microorganisms require to survive and reproduce. Encasing the dried protein completely in the rendered fat creates a physical oxygen barrier that prevents oxidation at the fat-protein interface. Think of it like sealing your food inside a wax candle. The candle does not rot because wax is not a hospitable environment for biological activity. Rendered tallow functions as an edible version of the same principle. Here is the part that gets me every time. The caloric density of properly made pemmican is approximately 3,500 to 4,000 calories per pound. That is more than 4 times the caloric density of a comparable weight of cooked chicken breast, and roughly equivalent to the same weight of pure olive oil, except that pemmican provides complete protein alongside the fat calories. The Plains nations who developed this food were not working from nutritional science as we define it. They were working from centuries of observation about what kept people alive and functional in environments where failure meant death. Here is what you need, and I want to be honest with you. This is genuinely it. You need lean beef, venison, or bison. The leaner, the better. Fat mixed into the muscle tissue will reduce shelf life because it is not rendered. Top round or bottom round, beef works perfectly. 1.5 pounds costs approximately $6 to $8 depending on your market. You need beef tallow or suet. Suet is raw kidney fat from beef and is the traditional rendering source. Most butchers will give or sell it very cheaply. 1 pound of suet costs $1 to $2 from a butcher, or about $5 to $6 pre-rendered from a grocery store. You need dried berries. Saskatoon berries are the traditional choice but are not widely available. Dried cranberries, dried blueberries, or dried tart cherries work identically in the preservation chemistry and cost about $2 to $3 for a small bag. Optional, a small amount of coarse salt, a few pinches. Total ingredient cost, between $10 and $14.30 for a 2-pound batch providing approximately 7,000 calories. Everything I used is listed in the description below and in the first pinned comment for easy reference. Now we make it. This process has 3 stages, and the order is not negotiable. You dry the meat first, you render the fat second, you combine them third. Reversing any step will produce an inferior and potentially unsafe product. Stage 1. Drying the meat. Slice your lean beef as thin as you can manage, ideally 1/8 of an inch or less. Partially freezing the meat for 30 minutes before slicing makes this significantly easier because the partially frozen muscle fiber holds its shape under the knife. Lay the slices on a wire rack over a sheet pan and place them in your oven at its lowest setting, typically 170 degrees Fahrenheit, with the door propped open 1 inch to allow moisture to escape. Dry for 6 to 8 hours until the slices are completely brittle, snap cleanly when bent, and show no flexibility anywhere along their length. This is your test. Flex every piece before you proceed. Any piece that bends rather than snaps contains residual moisture and must go back in the oven. Residual moisture is the only thing that will compromise a pemmican batch. The slices should feel like jerky that has gone slightly past the point where you would want to eat it. Dark, rigid, and completely desiccated. Here is where most people ruin the entire batch. They pull the meat at the jerky stage, when it is still slightly pliable and tastes good as a standalone snack. Pemmican requires complete desiccation, not partial drying. The difference between a batch that lasts 25 years and one that develops mold at 6 months is 2 extra hours in the oven at this stage. Patience here is the entire preservation system. Once the meat is completely brittle, break or pulse it in a food processor until it reaches a coarse powder. Not flour fine, coarse like rough cornmeal. You should be able to see individual fiber strands in the powder. This is your dry protein base. Stage 2, rendering the tallow. If you are using suet, chop it into rough pieces and place it in a heavy pot over the lowest heat your stove allows. Low and slow is the rule. The goal is to melt the fat without browning it. Brown tallow has developed off flavors and has also begun to oxidize, which shortens shelf life. Render for 1 to 2 hours until the liquid fat is clear and golden, and the remaining solid pieces, called cracklings, are light brown and floating. Strain the liquid fat through a fine mesh strainer or cheesecloth into a clean container. What remains in the container is pure tallow. If you are using pre-rendered tallow, simply warm it gently until liquid. Here is the second thing that gets me every time. Rendered beef tallow has an oxidative stability that is genuinely superior to most vegetable oils. Its saturated fat content, which ranges from 45 to 50%, means it has very few of the double bonds in its fatty acid chains that are vulnerable to oxidative attack. Think of double bonds in fat molecules like open doors in a house. Saturated fats have almost all their doors closed. Polyunsaturated fats like corn or soybean oil have dozens of open doors. Oxidation walks in through open doors. Tallow is a nearly closed house. Stage 3, combining. Working quickly, while the tallow is still fully liquid but not scalding hot, pour it over your meat powder in a large mixing bowl. The ratio by weight is 1 to 1, equal parts dry meat powder and liquid fat. Add your dried berries at this stage. The traditional ratio is approximately 1 part berries to 4 parts meat fat mixture by weight. Though this is flexible, Stir everything together thoroughly until the mixture is uniform and the fat has fully coated every particle of the meat powder. Pour the combined mixture into a shallow pan or individual molds lined with parchment, pressing it down firmly to eliminate air pockets. Air pockets are oxygen reservoirs and your enemy at this stage. Press firmly enough that the surface is completely smooth and dense. Allow to cool completely at room temperature. The mixture will firm from liquid to solid as the tallow sets. When fully cool and completely solid, cut or unmold into bars and wrap tightly in parchment or cloth. Store in a cool, dark, dry place. At 1 week, your pemmican is fully cured and at its best flavor. At 3 months, it is indistinguishable from week 1 in quality and texture. At 1 year, stored in consistent, cool conditions, a small surface layer of fat may have taken on a slightly waxy appearance, but the interior will be unchanged. At 25 years, if stored away from heat, light, and moisture, Hudson's Bay Company records and multiple documented Arctic expedition accounts confirm the product remains calorie-dense and safe. Smell the surface of the bar at any point during storage. It should smell faintly of fat, with a mild, meaty and berry undertone. Any sharp, acrid, or rancid smell is your signal that either the tallow was not rendered cleanly or moisture entered the batch. A properly made bar smells mild and slightly pleasant, like a pantry rather than a kitchen. When you cut a thin slice of your finished bar after 30 days, the cross-section shows an even distribution of dark meat fiber and cream-colored solidified fat, with visible flecks of berry throughout. The texture is firm and slightly waxy under a knife. The smell is mild and earthy. The taste is dense and satisfying in a way that is genuinely difficult to describe to anyone who has not experienced concentrated fat and protein at that ratio. It is not trying to be anything other than what it is, which is the most efficient food ever developed for sustained physical work in difficult conditions. If what you just saw connects to a larger vision of food independence and self-reliance across every system in your home and kitchen, the Lost Frontier Handbook maps out exactly that territory. You will see a QR code in the bottom right corner of your screen right now. Point your phone camera at it, and it will take you directly there. It goes deeper into food preservation, long-duration storage, and the pioneer skills that kept families fed through every kind of crisis. This is not really about making survival food. It is about the specific satisfaction of understanding that the most calorie-dense food ever developed by any culture on Earth can be made in your kitchen this afternoon from 3 ingredients and a low oven. About holding a 2-pound block of food that will outlast your car, possibly your mortgage, and certainly your next grocery run. About knowing that whatever happens to supply chains or refrigeration or the grid, you have a shelf in your pantry that does not need any of it. And if the knowledge of how food preservation, medicinal plants, water systems, and complete homestead skills connect into one coherent life, the Lost Frontier Handbook is built around exactly that integrated picture. The QR code in the bottom right corner of your screen will take you there directly when you are ready. It covers the full spectrum of the skills the pioneers used to thrive completely independent of any supply chain. I do not want you to make a 20-pound batch this weekend before you understand how your specific kitchen conditions affect the drying stage. Start with half a pound of beef, 1 rendering of a small amount of tallow, a handful of dried cranberries. Make a small test bar, cut it after 2 weeks and look at the interior. If the cross-section is uniform, dense and dry with no visible moisture pockets, you have confirmed that your process is correct. You are out $14.30 in one afternoon. But when you hold that small bar and realize it will still be exactly what it is in 25 years, you will not need me to convince you to make the larger batch. If this forgotten recipe changed the way you look at what belongs on a pantry shelf, please subscribe and like the channel. We are unearthing practical wisdom that the modern world has tried to bury. Stock your shelf with what actually lasts. The next treasure of forgotten knowledge will be revealed soon.